Welcome back to my channel, amazing art friend. I have a super easy but super textured idea to share with you today, and it revolves around masking tape. So for this project, you'll want to grab some low tack masking tape or artist tape or washi tape, whatever you might have. And I have some ordinary masking tape here. I also have some mixed media paper. So this is a heavyweight paper that can take a few layers of acrylic paint. This particular technique will work on anything that you can stick masking tape down onto or washi tape down onto, and that will also take a few layers of paint. So think things like canvases, walls, your art journal pages, paper, cardboard, just a few ideas to get you thinking. You're also going to find that tweezers are super handy for this, and of course some paint and a brush. And acrylic paint is perfect, but you can try it out with other paints too. Now I'm going to start this off with some layers of colour, and you can use any colours that are calling to you today. The colours that I'm using are recently from some other pieces that I was doing, so these are the remains of what was on my palette, and I thought I would use them up in this project. You can see that as I'm applying them to my piece of paper, I'm just letting my brush dry. It's doing some lovely dry brushing effects. I'm not too worried about coverage for this because I want some of that paper to show through, but that's what I like doing. I quite like the paper to show through. If you want to go for complete coverage, then just go for complete coverage, that's fine. All you're going to do is just make sure that your masking tape or washi tape or whatever you're using is happy to sit and then come off of the paint that you're using. So you can always test that out first on a spare piece of paper. Once this is completely dry, and you want to have it completely dry, you can get out that tape and start adding it to the piece. And how you add it is going to determine what kind of pattern you will end up with. So I'm adding mine travelling across the paper, but really you can do whatever you like and have it travelling up and down, diagonally for extra movement, or what about adding it in shapes or letters? Whatever you like. The masking tape I'm using is quite wide. I think this one's around about 1 inch wide. So I actually think that I'm gonna add in some more texture and interest if I just tear up the masking tape to get some interesting shapes and a mix of like straight edges and sort of more torn, crinkly edges. It can be quite tricky at times to stop the tape from sticking to itself, especially when you're tearing along the piece, so be careful with that. But remember, you can also cut the tape with scissors too. It is a good idea to test the tape that you're using out on your materials beforehand and make sure that you can just pull it safely off the paint or whatever surface that you're using, the paper, your art journal, whatever it is that you're using, and that you can pull it off without tearing the paint or the surface. And if your tape is just too tacky, then you can use the fluff technique to lower your tape's tackiness even more, and you do that by just sticking it onto a piece of fabric before you stick it onto your project. So a couple of top tips for you here. You need to be able to take this tape off easily and quickly too. So either let a bit of it hang over the edge of your piece of paper or your surface, whatever you're using, or you can fold a tiny bit of one end over on itself. So you've just got something there to hook onto with either some tweezers or your fingers. Another handy tip is to not feel the need to smooth the tape down too much, and you don't really need to press it into that surface that you're working on. You just need it to have covered enough of the surface without letting paint go underneath it to get the kind of painty pattern that we're looking for. So prepare yourself for just, a rough and ready look, and don't worry about imperfections. Once you have tape in place, now you can add your next layer of paint, and this time I'm going to just cover everything. So this is going to be full coverage. But just as that last layer, you don't have to go with full coverage. you could change it up and do it however you want. But you do want to add enough coverage that you can see the shapes of the tape. So I've picked two colours that I know will go well together, but will also contrast with that first layer of colour for just extra impact. And one of the colours that I'm using is an opaque and has a really good coverage to it. So that should go over the darker colours that are underneath nicely. And I can add it on thickly just to be sure. This isn't really a deal breaker. It doesn't have to be an opaque colour that you use here or just opaque colours. You can always use translucent colours and just play around with how that works and experiment with that too. Now you do want to work quickly and in sections as well. So don't feel that you have to cover the whole surface in one go. Do one bit at a time. The aim of the game here is to cover the tape, but not leave the tape down too long under that acrylic layer. If this layer of acrylic paint dries too quickly, then it's going to stick your tape down with it. Acrylic paint is a really good glue. Working in sections does seem to work really well, and I make sure that I have good coverage over and next to the tape that I want to take off before I go ahead and take it off. When I do take my tape off, I do it as carefully as I possibly can, but also as quickly as I possibly can. And if you need to place your fingers on the piece to lever that tape off and give you just a little bit of extra pull, then make sure your fingers are clean. This technique gets really messy really quickly because you're working with wet paint. And when you take off your masking tape, it's still covered with wet paint, which gets all over your hands. And you don't want to be putting fingerprints on that lovely piece now, do you? Well, you might do, but that's another piece entirely. So where I can't lever my tape off easily with my hands, that's when I grab those little folded pieces that we put in the tape earlier with a pair of tweezers, pull it up a little bit more so that I can then grab it with my fingers. But you can also use things like a small thin brush or a pin to get underneath that masking tape to lever it up to give you something to grab onto. So you can see how this is developing, and I'm just working my way down the piece in exactly the same way until all of the tape is covered with paint and then all of the tape is removed, and it gives me a great pattern. Once all that tape is off, then just go ahead and let your paint dry completely. You now have a piece with an interesting and unique texture, and it can be a standalone piece in its own right, something nice and abstract, or if you used shapes and letterings, that could make an interesting focal point. Or you can use this piece for a background for something else, kick off some other ideas with it, or you could even cut it up and use it in collage. There's all sorts of things you could do with this, so have lots of fun with it. I kind of like mine as it is today, and I'm just going to add a line around my shapes with a black pencil and call it done. But let me know how you get on with this technique, and of course do share the results with me over on Instagram because you know I'd love to see them. If you want some more ideas, I have lots of mixed media videos for you to dive on into, so go grab your paints and some pencils and some paper and come on and do some more art with me. I will see you over in those videos next. Bye!